This conference will now be recorded.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for spending some time with us this morning and joining us for These Times and Our Roles. They are changing. This is the second session of our first series called Predictably Unpredictable as a part of our new virtual learning series, House and Home. So for those of you I haven't had an opportunity to meet, my name is Scott Fusell, and I'm the Director of Education for CSL Management. I'm also the host of House and Home. I'm a Beta Theta Pi from Middle Tennessee State, where I had an absolutely life-changing experience, and that's why I continue to do what I do for the people I do it with the people I do it with. And I'm so grateful that you guys have decided to spend some time with us this morning by showing up. What that reveals to us is you care deeply about these facilities, you care deeply about the students that call them home, and you care deeply about the fraternity and sorority movement. So for you being so generous with your time and talent, know that we are extraordinarily grateful. So thanks for spending some time with us this morning. So with me, as always, is Christina Kinzer. She's one of our senior operations specialists here at CSL Management. She's also my right hand when it comes to our educational programming. And for the purposes of today, she's going to be playing a couple of different roles. She'll have a small part later where she's going to be sharing with you and asking some questions, but she's also our chat management wizard. We'll have everybody in a listen only mode this morning or this afternoon, wherever you might be listening to this recording or whenever you might be listening to this recording or watching it live. And so what we'd encourage you to do is if you have a question throughout the session, please jump into the chat, put your question there, and then we will do our best to field those at the end of our session. So again, we'll have everybody in lesson only mode. So if you will please just jump into the chat, ask your questions there. Christina will be monitoring the chat conversation so we can have a good conversation happening virtually and verbally. So would appreciate that. Christina, thank you so much for manning that and being with us this morning. And doing the lion's share of our heavy lifting this morning is going to be Woody Ratterman, who's the managing partner here at CSL. And he is also a Beta Theta Pi and a chapter brother of mine at Middle Tennessee State. And we've jokingly started referring to him as the closest thing that we have at CSL to a Dr. Fauci. For the last 2.5 months, he's really immersed himself in this whole thing called COVID-19 and what he's learning about the way the virus behaves and how that affects our facilities and what we need to be doing to prepare for the fall has been really extraordinary. He's bringing something new to our team every day. It seems like that he's learned because we all know that the information out there on this topic is moving daily. So we appreciate Woody being with us and all of the expertise and the time that he's devoted to making sure that we are able to serve our clients well, serve our friends well, and so that you can have these houses and homes prepared for this fall. So Woody, thanks for being with us this morning. We really appreciate you making time.
Thanks, Scott.
So let's talk about what we want you to get out of today. As always with our House and Home series, we want you to leave these sessions feeling connected, feeling confident, and feeling compelled. Today specifically, though, we want you to have some clarity on some of the changes you can expect, and we want to make sure that you know what questions you should be asking between now and mid-August and early September. So the other two things we want to do is we want to acknowledge the uncertainty and we want to help each other be okay with that. I think this is a good opportunity to give this big gigantic disclaimer that again, we talked about this yesterday with some friends that, you know what, none of us have been through a pandemic before where we're trying to manage fraternity and sorority housing. So nobody has all the answers right now, but we're piecing them together. So you're not going to leave this conversation with every single question answered, but we're going to do the best we can. But what's important for you to know is that your national house corporation or your local house corporation and the folks like CSL and other folks like us, we're all trying our absolute best to pull that information together as rapidly as possible. So what we'd encourage you to do is help be a part of the solution and help us gather the information we need to make really educated, sound decisions as we prepare for the fall. So again, great disclaimer that, man, we're all doing the best we can right now. So if you don't get the answer you want immediately, let's extend each other some grace, because the one thing that we are certain of right now is that we are going through a ton of change. That is the one thing we can be absolutely certain of. So what our job today is to provide some clarity in terms of, you know, what we can be doing, the questions we should be asking, so we're all clearly and well versed in knowing exactly what we're going to be getting ourselves into come this fall. So here's kind of a roadmap for today's conversation. We're going to be jumping into some changes that you're going to be seeing from a communications perspective. We're going to dive into the operations and the everyday changes you might be experiencing or will be experiencing. We'll get into the relationship management piece too, where the dynamics between how you support the vendor partners that come into your facility and those relationships with your members. Those dynamics are going to shift a bit this fall. So we want to get into some of those conversations. And sprinkled throughout, we want you to be very mindful and aware of the fact that you're going to get tips on how you can be empowered to be mindful of your own personal health and safety, because that is paramount in this situation. And we want to give you some tips and information to help you advocate for yourself and to be a part of the solution as we all prepare for this fall and going forward. So that's really what we're running after today. And if we can check all of those boxes during this conversation, that will be a big win for us. So as we prepared for today, I reached out to several of my friends that work for national house corporations at the international level, and I wanted to share with you some of what they shared with me, because I want you to know what they're saying. I asked, what are some of the changes you expect for house directors going forward? And I wanted to share a little bit about what they feel is going to be happening and what you can do to be a part of the solution. So I wanted to share a few of those comments with you. I think you're going to be really,
Scott, can I interrupt you? I'm sorry to
please.
interrupt you just real quick, but I want to be clear on these are house or national staff that work in housing that employ house directors directly. So I think it's very important that you clarify that who we're talking to are people that are doing this every day, just like all of us, or in the same role as a local house corporation. So just wanted to provide that clarity.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that, Woody. So I think you'll be, you may or not be surprised, and you may be excited about some of the things that we're going to share with you here, because I think there's an opportunity here to really elevate your role and the impact that you're having on the chapter. So one person I spoke to, they talked about, they want you to know that you are empowered, and you're empowered to make really good decisions for your own health and for the health of the organization and the members who call your house home. So a lot of the policies and procedures and guidelines are going to be very locally driven. So they're going to be counting on you to be mindful of what's happening at the local level and to share that information up the stream. So again, you're going to be empowered through this whole situation. They want you to know that. Communication is going to be more important than it ever has been. So we're hearing folks say, we really want to encourage them to schedule more one-on-ones with their supervisor. Make sure that plan is in place. We need to make sure that we're super clear and we're empowered to really execute on the plan that we have in place for opening, for communications, for quarantining if somebody is diagnosed. We got to be super clear on that. So communication is hyper important in this new environment that we're running after. We also heard that this is a good opportunity to elevate your position. We expect, or you're going to be expected to play quarterback, maybe more so now than you ever have been before. So we're going to see changes in terms of how we support the meal plans that our students are buying. So to make sure that, if we're shifting maybe meal times, okay, how are you going to work with your chef or your food service provider to make sure that you're meeting those needs as students are coming in at different times? How are we making sure that we're offering different options so people get what they need when they need it conveniently? So you're going to be more expected probably to work with, to manage your vendors and make sure that they understand exactly what the expectation is for their behaviors and how they perform their jobs. So you're going to be playing quarterback maybe more so than you've played before. So expect that to be one way that you really elevate your position moving forward. You're also going to be expected to be part of the solution. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, your thought leadership is going to be critical moving forward. A lot of these policies and procedures and what works well and what doesn't work well is going to be very locally driven. So we need to know, or the folks that you report up to, whether that's you're reporting to a local house corporation or a national house corporation, they're going to need to know from you what's working well, what's not, what additional support do you need? So we're counting on you, all of us are counting on you to bring ideas and solutions, not just emotional reactions. We desperately need you to be the adult in the room. So you're the eyes and ears of that facility, and we need to hear and see through you. So again, your thought leadership and helping us move forward and be prepared to maintain and open these facilities effectively is going to be critically important moving forward. And then some folks told us that they don't see many changes at all. Your job is not going to change significantly. It's just going to be, how do we scale it? How do we do more of what we've been doing? And how do we do it better than we've ever done it before? So it's going to run the gamut. Some of you are going to experience extraordinary amounts of change, others maybe not so much, but it's all about scale and how do we do it better than we've ever done it before. So that's some of what we're hearing at the national, international level. And just want to give that perspective so you can understand or have a little bit of a backdrop in terms of what's driving the content that we've created today. And with that being said, again, we're going to get into a lot of the changes we're expecting from the operations side and from a communication side, et cetera. And to share that information, we're going to lean heavily onto Woody. And Woody, would appreciate it if you would take it away. Go for it.
Might help if I unmute. Sorry about that. Unmuting is a good thing. So appreciate it, Scott. And thanks for everybody for being here today as well. One of the things Scott brings up the first slide that I would want all of you to be very mindful of with the change and what is coming is the fact that you need to be very open and honest with yourself in your comfortability of working in an environment with 18 to 22-year-olds within a pandemic that is not affecting them to the level that it may affect you or us or others in society. And as we work with a lot of house directors and as we're trying to help them navigate and get prepared for this fall as well, we're having those very direct conversations with them and with their house corporation or their national partner and saying, if these changes make you so uncomfortable, it's better to know now. And if it's just an environment that we're not suited for with what we may be exposed to, what we may be asked to do, we need to have that conversation now. Because I think a lot of the things that we're going to do, obviously, to provide is a safe environment for the house and for the members and for you, especially as the staff in these facilities. At the end of the day, we need to be really realistic that they're going to treat this as their residence. So they may not social distance like you want them to. The students may not wear PPE like you'd like for them to be wearing a mask or otherwise. So I think it's really important in this environment that you're really open and you're honest. And that's kind of our first point here on the communication. As we were preparing for this and talking through this, we were thinking, what is it that our house directors do every day, and how is that impacted directly related to COVID-19? I mean, if you know our organization, and many of you do, we'll go down a rabbit hole faster than anybody. And when we talk about roles and responsibilities on a global scale, but we really just wanted to take each one of these and thinking it from a COVID-19 and a pandemic and what we should be looking at. And so when we talk about communication, I think the biggest piece, and understand too, this slide, there's a lot of content on these slides, and so I don't want you to feel like you got to write a lot of notes or memorize it. We'll make it available, and we're not going to speak to every point on it. We really want this to be a conversation today, and I would emphasize so that we're not talking over everyone. If you do have a question or a comment, put it in the chat so that Christina can capture it and we can converse about it through that mechanism throughout the call. But what's really important on the communication front is that you're getting clear communication and you're giving clear communication. And especially it's how you're expected to support some of the policies and procedures that are being made. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here in a second and give you some of our thought processes. As Scott said earlier, we all want answers, and we certainly understand that, and we want to get there as fast as we can. And what's good thing is we're seeing more and more decisive decisions on the universities going into the fall. We're starting to get more of those answers. But some of these things, and a lot of these things are going, especially as you talk about your role, are going to be specific to you and your comfortability. It's going to be specific to your region, your university, and your organization. We've talked about that a lot throughout all of our webinars at this point. But there are universal items of this stuff that we need to be mindful of. And the first one is really on that communication and making sure that in every step of these roles that you're responsible for on the vendor management, guest policy, all the things we're about to talk about, we just want to make sure that you're giving clear communication and you're getting it. And if you're not getting it, you really need to push that issue so that you get the answers that you're looking for. Let's go to the next slide, Scott. So let's talk. So again, we thought about our everyday operational duties. If we're sitting in your lens and we're wanting answers, we want to know about the move in and move out process, right? We know it's going to be different. And so what are your expectations for that? Because we know it runs the gamut. Some of you may have advisors and the chapter leadership that run it, and you're there more from the behind the scenes. To some of you are very involved. We also know that some move-in processes are a lot less formal than others, and you may be just making a key available and however it may be. But we know this year it has to be more organized, especially depending on where you are and what's the status of your region in terms of, now we'd see the levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 and how we proceed through that. So, but you need to, if you're not comfortable and you want to make sure there's social distancing, and we want to make sure that we have some type of indication of where you need to be and when throughout the process, it's going to be the questions that you're going to certainly want to be asking. And we, as it's noted here, we will be actually having a webinar just on this and talking about move-in and how to best prepare for it. And what do we need to be thinking through? So if you think through your own traditional duties, whether it's, again, behind the scenes, making sure if you offer drinks and snacks and things of that nature, if you're doing it, if you are right in the forefront and we need to think about social distancing, how do you set the house up, and what's the comfortability as it relates to the environment overall, something that we'll be expanding on here shortly as well. Let's go to the next slide, Scott. Then we jumped into, you're not only the eyes and ears, but you're the welcoming committee, right? Your role is you really can set the experience for that young man or woman that are coming in the house and their parents, and doing it as in the most gracious way as possible. So I think about the whole webinars that have been out there about recruitment and how recruitment is going to be different if we're going to be wearing a mask. And I think that's going to be a little bit different too, as we're in a welcoming committee, or if you are the welcoming committee, if you will, to your house and you're a mask, that's just going to be different. We need to be comfortable with that. But again, getting the day-to-day interaction and talking about your vendor partners, and we've talked about setting expectations for them early. So if you have direct management of your vendors when they're coming to the house, which most of you do, make sure you have some communication. We're working with our clients and the national organizations and local house corporations that we work with in providing that tool so that you can provide to the vendors as well as to when they're coming. But when guests come, parents come, how is that visitor policy going to be? Are there, we kind of talked about this last week, expectations to check temperatures. That was a big conversation early on in the process. We don't hear that as much anymore. Now we hear that we may have a non-touch thermometer made available for the house, and that's something that we may want to have to the members if they want to check it, but be very specific and clear. Am I the one that's going to be doing it, or do we just put it in a place that they can get it and put it back? So I don't envision it being every guest that comes to the house, but your house corporation or your organization may have more stringent expectations on that. So there's so much value to your role as that welcoming person to the facility. And I think you really want to talk through about that as globally as you can, but also in the minutia, especially as we put some points down here, how people are going to move through the house and what they're allowed to move through, and when they actually walk into the house, how do they get educated, if you will, about the policies and procedures that you're asking guests and members to adhere to when they're in the house. So that was just a big piece for us, for you, as you work with your house corporation, as you work with your organization, is really thinking through those little nuances of welcoming people to the house, educating people in the, about the policies and procedures. How do you continue to create a home environment, right? Our house and home, the house is related to the business side of what we do, and the home is what we're really trying to deliver to those members. And how much can we do that when we're in a pandemic scenario? And those are some really good conversations you should be having. Let's go to the next slide, Scott. So we also looked at supplies, and of course, if you're on the call last week, and we were actually even talking a little bit about it as people are coming in, and we're happy to answer any questions on that. But really, a lot of house directors, your role is related to supply management, either working with your kitchen management companies or any kind of large purchasing organization that you may be aware of. We've also seen, just as a FYI, and I didn't say this earlier to the question as people were rolling in, universities, just like we've talked about universities hopefully making space on campus available for quarantining, we're now seeing that some of them are having conversations about opening up their purchasing channels for fraternities and sororities as well. So stay tuned on that, and hopefully you'll see some more guidance, and then that may be an opportunity. But we know there's large lead time on hand sanitizer, signage, and some of this could be just temporary signage. We're not necessarily meaning you need to go and create a lot of fancy signage, but certainly talking with your house corporation and your national organization about what signs they want posted and where. Now's the time to start getting that stuff, because obviously as we get closer to the fall, we're not going to have we're going to be distracted by cleaning and getting ready for move-in for itself. So again, the supply mindfulness, as we stay here, is just, we know it's going to be a longer lead time. If you're buying stuff locally, really evaluate that and make sure that you're going to be able to still get it readily available, and if not, then look to your other purchasing channels. Let's go to the next slide, Scott.
Yeah, let me just add one thing there, Woody.
Sure.
You mentioned signage, and I just want to be clear that everybody knows what kind of signage we're talking about, and that's all around social distancing, best practices in terms of health and safety of your membership, and those are in and around the house. So Woody mentioned those could be temporary signs or what have you. So we're talking about, there are templates on our website from the CDC and from a couple of different companies that give you some guidelines on that. So feel free to go download those, and literally we're talking about, you can just print them and either pin or tape them to the wall. But we want to make sure that we are communicating a clear and consistent message in terms of expectations. We talked last week about making sure that we are modeling the right behaviors or the right actions, the right reactions. So one of the ways that we can continue to make sure that our students that are living in and who are visiting are doing the things that we expect them to do is to be doing it ourselves, and also have those reminders posted throughout the house that, hey, here's what we expect in terms of mask usage, here's what we expect in terms of social distancing. Just those constant reminders and keeping the message fresh and in front of folks is really, really important. So that signage piece, just wanted to clarify to make sure that we're all super clear on what we meant by the signage piece. That isn't just in terms of having your exit routes or emergency exit routes posted, but we've got a whole new list of signage needs that we need to be considering going forward. So just want to add some color to that. All right.
Perfect. Every day, again, going back, your relationship management, right? You're not only the welcoming committee, but now we've got to manage staff. We've got to manage our on-site kitchen staff maybe, or when the cleaners come, certainly the whole vendor management aspect of it, our students, guests, folks visiting from the university, whatever it may be, really that relationship standpoint and how you're going to collaborate, how you're going to work together on some of these policies and procedures, and especially if you're starting to see some of these procedures related to social distancing, like Scott said, talk about who's holding the accountability card on that and what your role is specifically to manage that or enforce it. I would suspect, as with the other normal communications or guidelines, and we know there's little tweaks based on your house corporation or your organization, but the role generally for the house director right now is for the safety and well-being of the members to an extent, right? You're not there to babysit them. You're not there to hold their hands the whole time. They are legal adults and they need to hold themselves accountable to their own personal safety. So I think, to Scott's point, we're going to post some signage. We may reduce density of furniture in certain areas to, again, to relay the message. I don't envision that they are going to be asking you to do a lot of policing of it, though, as it relates to the residents and to the members. I think you do have the right and the expectation for your vendor partners and certain guests that are visiting the house to politely ask them if the standard is, if you're a guest, we would prefer that you wear a mask because we're still in level 1. I just came back from Berkeley, California, and they are still very much in mask full time indoors, even a lot of them outdoors. So there's going to need, I would say, the other part of the relationship management side is you're going to have a lot of flexibility because things are going to change potentially from week to week or month to month as we get into certain areas and as we see peaks and valleys maybe in the spread of the virus. But that really having that clarity on how they want you to engage. You know, as house directors, we get a lot of guidance on when we should be or should not be in chapter meetings, when we should be or not be present for events, all these different pieces. So I would want to make sure I'm getting the guidance and the expectations as it relates to the relationship management in the facility and how we will work. And I think there's still to your own, I mean, all of you are normally very gracious in office hours and inviting people into your space to visit if you need a private conversation and things of that nature. So you need to do some self-inventory on that and what you're going to want to do. And we know some folks are want to almost create as much of a pure environment to their little niche in the house as much as possible, and others may not be as concerned and will still have an open door policy. And neither one's right or wrong. I think what it is what can you do to provide enough comfort for yourself and still provide enough comfort to the members and people visiting the house to where they feel like you're still there to support them and create a great environment. So that's just some of the things on the relationship management. And I will say, I'm going to pivot just for a second because this is something that we're, just like supplies, we're hearing a lot of conversation about density and we're hearing a lot of conversation about layout. I just want to add just something because it kind of goes in with relationships and it goes in with signage and everything else that's in the house. One tool or one idea that you may want to look at if you're being charged with trying to figure out, and a lot of you will be, the layouts of the house, and can we get 6 feet between the beds? Can we get, if we can't, can we get at least between their faces if we sleep head to toe, and what does that look like? When it comes to common area spaces, the tool that we talked about recently is that understand in code when you're trying to decipher how many people can occupy a space, they use the ratio of 7 square feet for someone sitting at a chair and 15 square feet for someone sitting at a table. So using 1,000 square feet as an example, if you have a dining room, most of them are bigger than that, but that's probably a good average, but 1,000 square feet, and we're using somebody sitting at a table and we have 15 square feet per person, that's going to give us about 66 square feet or 66 people that can be in that room. So then you start looking at a 6 feet social distancing. We know some of our friends in the kitchen management company have been studying a lot of what Disney's doing. They're using like a 36 diameter radius around the individual to come up with that. But as we play with these numbers for our clients, we're seeing that you're probably reducing capacity in rooms between 50%, maybe 30 or 40%. I don't know that we have to be an exact science, but when we talk about signage and stuff like that, you may just say, hey, students, just as an FYI, in this room, if you want to really social distance, and we really like for you to keep capacity at X. Again, just a recommendation, not necessarily a mandate or whatever, but what are we doing to reinforce the message, and what are we doing at least to give them the opportunity to have that distancing if they need it. So I just wanted to, that's just something that's we learn something every week. So if we have a nugget like that, regardless of the topic like this, we'll try to pivot and share that with you. Let's go to the next slide, Scott. So safety and security obviously is a big part of this, right? And again, we've talked a lot today about taking your own personal inventory of what you want and think through from safety and security. And when I would say, again, we've actually had house directors that we work with come back, and to some extent in their comfortability, they basically wanted a full head to toe type of coverage, even on their shoes and everything else, if someone was to get diagnosed with COVID-19. I think if you have that level of anxiety, you really need to be having an open, honest conversation between yourself, the house corporation, the organization, if you're going to be able to make it throughout the fall and spring, as you see members come in that aren't social distancing and doing different pieces of it. But certainly, as it relates to your own having PPE available, maybe not just a disposable mask. Again, we talked about it last week about the 3M 8511 is a mask that really provides a little bit more robust protection that's available to everyday people. And think about your distancing yourself. And again, if you go back to communication, you go back to the welcoming committee, you go back to managing the relationship in the house. That's really your safety, as you move around the house and how you want to distance and how you want to protect your space, maybe in terms of just trying to create as much of an environment of less risk as possible. But also then let's talk about safety and security of the facility and working with your house corporation, working with your organization about visitor policies, about the idea of when the house is empty on the security standpoint. If you're there, like many of you spent probably 30, 45 days by yourself in a big house. And if you're uncomfortable with that, we know that we worked with many of you and our clients in terms of getting extra patrols by the police, especially campus police is willing to do that, making sure if we don't have a security alarm, maybe we need to install one. They're, for the most part, not that expensive. So that scenario of it is certainly something you want to think about the facility. And the hardest thing is going to be the social distancing and the enforcement of that, and we understand that. So there's not a rule of thumb, and there's not a one size fits all on that, and that really needs to be specific. I mean, me personally have visited campuses in Texas, Oklahoma, California, and Indiana, and other places just in the last 3 weeks, and I can tell you, each one of them is different. And so that's just something that you're going to really have to drill down on the communication piece and what your expectation is going to be on that accountability front for the personal safety and security of the member.
Yeah, Woody, I'll jump in there. When we think about that one of the very first slides in the what they're saying section early in the session, we need you to be empowered to take care of your own personal safety and the safety of your members that call your houses home. So I think that's a really important piece there. When we're talking about absolute clarity and making sure that we're super clear on expectations, this is one of those areas where I think everybody's still figuring it out. So I would encourage you to get involved in that conversation with your local house corporation, your national house corporation. Be a part of that conversation to help articulate what you're comfortable doing, and get a really good feel for what they're counting on you to do. So, we've oftentimes house directors, and we had, think back to last summer, we talked about a couple behavioral scenarios at the Fraternal House Directors Conference, and several house directors are like, no, that's not my house, my house corporation. They don't even want me engaging in that conversation. Well, because it was behavioral or chapter behavior or chapter operations focused. They just want be focused on the house. That's it. Well, we're starting to have some gray here because we've got this operations, which is the safety piece, that is really merging with some of the behavioral pieces. So really want to encourage you to have that conversation with your local house corporation, with your national house corporation, to make sure you're very, very clear on what they expect you to do in terms of enforcing the various policies that they put together, or recommendations that they make for you. So just want to be super clear on that one. So sorry to jump in there, Woody.
No, and I think, and you can go ahead to the next slide, because I think we cover this on others. And here's where this is right where I was going to go. I remember we included this, but it's really about the quarantine and standpoint. And if someone is diagnosed or is tested positive, and we were just dealing with it, Steve was dealing with it the last 2 days, where we had members that were still living in their house. This was a men's fraternity. They were hanging out with a member that was in an apartment. That member is now tested positive, and they've been going back and forth to the house and visiting the house. And so when that happens, and rest assured it will happen, what is your directive on that? Because it becomes a part of, I'm sure, the insurance, the liability, workers' comp, all those different pieces. You have the business side of it for you, but then you also, your comfortability. And I think some of the ideas that we would recommend, if you do have the ability to have a sick room, go ahead and have it set up to where that individual can certainly, if they were going to quarantine at the house, can just go there. You already have their cleaning supplies there for them. You have the ability for them to self-quarantine easily, and anything that they need in thinking through cleaning, if they're going to eat there, all the different pieces that you need, have that set up. And then also, what is the communication channel? Someone's sick, who am I to notify? When am I to notify? Who am I supposed to communicate after that? And continually in terms of the university, of the residents, of parents, and all the different pieces. We already know that HIPAA does not apply here, but there are certain privacy laws that do apply in these particular situations. So as we talked about last week, we want to be sensible, we want to be reasonable, and we want to be sensitive to what is going on here. But you really need to know, if someone is diagnosed, how do we go about and we work through this scenario and role play it. And okay, they're in room 201, they're diagnosed, there's 3 people living in that room. What are we going to do? And go from quarantining to getting them out of the house or staying in the house, working with the university, communication to the students and their parents, the cleaning, and all that, because you are going, as Scott said earlier, you're going to be the one executing this. If you work with a national organization, I know we've got a few on this call, they, for the most part, aren't going to be there day one. They may fly in if it becomes a crisis management situation, but they're not going to be there day one. And if it's local house corporation, they may not be in a position to where they can get there in 30 minutes. So this is just really important. If anything else today, is that you get that clarity. And I know that's probably the biggest clarity that you're out there seeking. And we can't provide specific recommendations as it relates to your house, but we can tell you that you will be the one driving it. So you need to make sure you know the policies and procedures related to your own personal safety, because again, if they self-quarantine the whole house and you may be high risk, it may be a situation where you need to be off property for 14 days and we need to bring in a temporary house director potentially. Or you may be off property, but you're still in the area and you're still managing the operations, and you come in the house only once or twice a day, or you partner with your kitchen management people that are still serving food. To all of those different contingencies are things that you need to be talking through and understanding.
Yes.
So yes, and I alluded to this to well as already a little bit as it relates to the house. And again, when we talk about facility safety itself, if the house is going to be empty with you or without you, what are we doing for security for a period of time? There could be a situation where we have interruptions in operations for weeks at a time, semester at a time, months at a time, like we've seen here as well. So looking at that is something that you may want to make sure that you look at the overall security of the facility, that you feel comfortable with your own security if you're in there for an extended period of time by yourself, that you guys feel good about security if it's sitting by it empty for a long period of time. And again, a security alarm, control the access, make sure your campus police and the city police know if you're going to be vacant so they can keep an eye on it, and work closely with your house corporation organization on putting those. You may pay a security company to make patrols if needed, if you're in a high risk area as it relates to crime. Scott, let's go to the next.
All right. So let's see here. So that's a good chunk of the content we had prepared for you, and we wanted to make sure we left plenty of time for questions today. So I know we've had a couple pop up, and we had several that we sort of forecasted. So I'm going to lean on Christina for this part of the time together and take us through a few questions we've already kind of forecasted, and then dive into the Q&A that's in the chat as well. So Christina, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Like Scott said previously, we had the opportunity to talk with amongst each other and with some housing partners just about this and preparing for today. And so we did, as he mentioned, have some forecasted questions that we wanted to go through. But while we're doing that, please don't hesitate to go ahead and drop any additional questions that you might have in the chat, so that we recognize that this is your time and you might have some questions, and we want to make sure that we also get those answered. So go ahead and drop those, and as soon as we're done with these forecasted questions, we'll go ahead and address those as well. Okay, so tell me the board's stance on all of this. What are you hearing from them? What are their expectations in terms of the guidelines you are creating for opening and maintaining the house?
Yeah, so what we were thinking here, and understanding this, if I'm sitting in a house director's stance, I want to know a general guideline of the temperature, no pun intended, of the person I work for, right? Whether it's a national organization, their headquarters staff, or a local house corporation and a board. Overall, where do you sit as it relates to your own personal interpretation of COVID-19? What is your thought process on what members are going to be doing or not doing in the house? I'm going to want to study that and understand if I'm comfortable with that, and we share some of those same beliefs or not. And if we don't share those same beliefs, let's talk about that and figure out if we can come to some type of commonality and common ground. Because again, we want to have, if I'm a house director, I want to know that, and I want to feel comfortable going into the fall of the group that I'm working for. What are they looking at? And it is a wide range of what everyone is kind of taking their angle at it. We've talked with house corporation board members who feel that things are blown out of proportion, that their students aren't going to social distance in the house. Anything that we try to put on them is going to fall on deaf ears. So we really don't see much changing. We're maybe going to up our cleaning some. We're going to make some PPE available. But in reality, they may say to me, like, what do we know your stat out there that just barely over 100 of these folks have died from COVID-19 in the United States at this point. So, hey, we're moving forward with just a normal standpoint. We have others that are taking it to the other extreme, and they're thinking, hey, you know, we have fingerprint technology at our doors. We may need to rethink that. And do we change that out? Do we have the money to change that out? How does that look? Everybody's talking about plexiglass or dividers. How are we going to do that in our house, and where do we need to do that? And we're going to put up every opportunity that we can. We're going to social distance. So have that conversation is the point here, and ask that question to your employer and talk through where they are just globally on COVID-19, and does it align with where you are and what you believe? And if it doesn't, then talk through those differences.
All right, next question, Christina, on accountability.
Okay, so now you've told me about the guidelines that you're wanting to establish. So now I would like to know, what is your expectation of me in holding members accountable to the COVID-19 guidelines that you have established?
Yeah, so this is a great question to ask, and I'm going to guess, not because we just are guessing, but because we've talked with a lot of our clients about this and what they're thinking, and what we're hearing, that what the accountability standpoint is going to be is that it's going to be similar to most of our roles right now. You're not the enforcer. You're maybe the encourager, right? If you're going around the house, you're seeing things happening or whatever, and you may, hey guys, you may want to distance a little bit if it's an appropriate opportunity to do that, or do you mind putting a mask on? That's our policy in this room, in this area, just like no eating in a area as well. It's not, there's certain things that you're asked to police is a horrible word, but that's kind of some of those things that you have. So there may be some of that, but I think for the most part, your accountability, what they're going to be asking you to do is ensuring that where we need signage, as we have signage, if that signage is gone, we replace it, that you're managing, that we have the appropriate levels of PPE based on the policies that they've set. If you're seeing shortages in any supplies that are key to their game plan as it relates to the house's infrastructure, and the game plan of the house's meeting the needs of their members related to COVID-19, those are the areas where they're going to really want, from an accountability standpoint, that you are managing, along with, again, that relationships to those areas where, with our vendors, with our staff, and with our guests, where you certainly have more of a role to play in terms of that accountability. Hopefully that makes sense.
I think that's one of those ones, Woody, where, just as everything else is changing daily or weekly, we might see some fluctuation on that as we get closer to the time schools coming into session, because I think that's one that everybody's struggling with or wrestling with big time right now. So another good example that, man, continue to be in close conversation, close communication with your local house corporation, your national house corporation. Make sure you're clear on exactly what your role is going to be once you've got those guidelines in place. Are you going to be the encourager or the enforcer? Constantly go back and have that conversation and make sure you're super crystal clear on what your role is going to be there.
Yeah, and I would imagine that there could be an instance where the university mandates something, or there is a local ordinance or some type of mandate for communal living that we may need to enforce. Now, obviously, there's not going to be somebody coming to buy every day, but when you're going to need to be prepared, just like we have to have sprinkler systems checked and other areas like that, there could be in your area that mandate. And so, to Scott's point, it may be a true accountability deal that you are required, because if we don't, our house shuts down. So that's a very good point.
Last question, Christina, what happens?
Okay, so yes. So how do you expect me to handle the situation when a resident tests positive for COVID-19?
Yeah, and so that and our recommendation on this is that certainly first and foremost, you need to look at your own personal health and safety and your potential for exposure, and thinking about your movement within the community and the house, and how you're feeling and your safety. Again, I think there's a lot of prep work that can be done in advance, to where you may not have to get too interactive with the member that has been impacted by this. I would suspect there will be a lot of conversations amongst the chapter, amongst the residents, to say, hey, with your house corporation, your organization, to say, hey, here's our plan if someone is diagnosed positive in the house, and they're going to be hopefully well educated on that and know what to do. So we expect you as a house director to know what our policy is, to make sure that that policy is implemented to the best of your ability. We want you to be safe in that process, but we need to make sure that the sick room's available if we're quarantining there. If they are quarantining on the university, that the member leaves the house as quickly as possible without touching everything on the way out, and that they're quarantining as safely as possible, and that you execute getting our cleaning staff there, or working with if you have a property management group, or if you're working with somebody on the board that may be designated as the COVID-19 chair or whatever it may be, but that you guys implement the cleaning protocols, the notifications, and understand where all those communications need to rest. To me, that's where your role will play.
Yeah, that's another good example. When we talked about it earlier, you're going to be expected to be the quarterback in more cases than you maybe previously were expected to be. And that's a good example where you're going to be in charge of quarterbacking the resources to get the cleaning company there to clean the space, and then really put into process or put into process the cleaning protocols, the communication protocols, and what do we do to make sure that that young person is cared for. So good stuff there. So that is the last of our scripted questions. We had an idea that, those are 3 that we continue to hear on an ongoing basis. Christina, I see a few popping up in the chat. Can we run through those really quickly? We're trying to be mindful of time. We got a few minutes left and want to make sure we can answer as many of those as possible.
Okay, so I wanted to back up a little bit. There was a question about what our thoughts were on the UV system to be put on the house HVAC, and I just wanted to make sure that Joanne did see Steve's response to that, and that was lights and HVAC units do seem to have some advantages that we are looking at. Obviously, this would be a continuous system that would be installed inside of the unit to where it couldn't have the potential of hurting anyone. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that too, that there's more coming out. That's one we're seeing, because there was early on when they were studying COVID-19 that they learned that the sun basically evaporates it quick, right? So they knew that the virus did not do well in the sun standpoint. So which the UV technology would certainly play that role, and it's something that Steve's been studying for us. But it would be a unit in the mechanical system itself. I will say, and I'm going to turn it over to Steve, that we've heard that there is a device that some folks have talked about where you can put this UV system in a room, and it basically sends ultraviolet rays to the room, if you will. That we've heard may be a debunk, but there's looking at it. But there's certainly relevant theory to this that's worth and that warrants more investigation potentially. Steve, you got anything to add on that?
I don't know if Steve's still with us. While we're waiting on Steve to jump in, Sandy's asking, if you could go over the square footage numbers per person again.
Sure. 7 square feet for a person just sitting at a chair or standing, 15 square feet for someone sitting at a table.
And you're using those numbers to determine about how many people you can have in a specific space based on that square footage, giving them an opportunity to appropriately social distance. That's the math that we're trying to get to, right?
Right. So code tells you if you're designing a room, you have to use 15 square feet of someone at a table. You got to provide that, right? So again, if you have 1,000 square feet, divide 15 into 1,000, and they're sitting at a table, it's 66. So that's whatever your square footage is. If they're sitting at a table, divide it by 15. That will give you an idea of occupancy. If your square footage is whatever it is, and they're standing or at a chair, you divide it by 7.
Great, thank you. Let's see here. I'm trying to answer a couple more of these. Joni's asking, where this is not specific to this conversation, but is asking, where these library of sessions are archived. I've been putting them in the Fraternal House Directors Facebook group. So if you want to see the replays, you can find them there. You can also search them on YouTube under House and Home. It should pop up there as well. So we're always sending the replays out to those who attend as well. So a couple different places to get them. And Joni, if you can't find them there, please shoot me an email and I'll send it to you directly. And then Nancy has a great comment here talking about the UV question. it sounds like some folks are actually putting those in place, and they are back ordered to late July, as best she can tell. So Lisa's asking, what's the approximate cost? I'm assuming that's for one of these UV units that she's talking about. What did you have an approximate cost
Well,
on?
I don't on a, yeah, I don't. So we have one, I have one in our house, but it's in the unit. Again, it's not in the house, but it's when the air comes across the unit outside in the condensing unit. And we have two systems. And I want to say it was probably $500 or $600. And then you got to change the light once a year, and that's about $100. So now think about, you guys have a lot, your house could have a lot of air handling units. So I think you should be prepared that it'll be a few $1,000s, if not more, to put them in every space. But I think it's a good conversation to have with your PM provider, and also be careful to know what you're buying. Certainly people are taking advantage of this fear a little bit, but we did it just for air quality, because we have some allergy issues within our family, but they're commonly known, so it shouldn't be too expensive.
Fantastic. So I do want to clarify one thing you just said, or reiterate it. There is a lot of misinformation out there, and it's interesting how something that seems like a definitive solution to an issue today is sort of debunked in a week or two. So we really want to encourage you to do a lot of research before you go spend thousands of dollars on either a cleaning solution or one of these types of units. Make sure you've got all of your ducks in a row, and you've done your research to make sure that what you are considering is a legit solution, a legit long-term solution to your issue before you go invest thousands of dollars on it. Because again, all of our information we're finding is a missing target. So hey, we're up against the top of the hour, so I'm going to wrap it up here and give you some next steps as we're moving on. Again, if you have additional questions, you can reach out to us via email and or in the Facebook group, and we'll certainly get back to you at our first opportunity. But just a couple moving forward steps for you. So things to expect. Again, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but a lot of the changes that you're going to see coming your way are going to be dependent on your region, your university, or your organization. So again, stay super connected to local resources and organizational resources, so you're aware of what you need to be doing, when you need to be doing it, and how you need to be doing it. So, and then the last thing I'll share with you, and this is really taken from those conversations I had with housing professionals earlier this week, is they're really seeing this as some pretty incredible opportunities for each of you. First off, to contribute in a really, really meaningful way, well beyond what you've already been doing, which is just incredible work. So this is an opportunity to elevate your position, to be a part of a big solution that is going to be a game changer for the men and women that live in your facilities. So it's a great opportunity to get creative and to, again, bring solutions to the table in a really meaningful way. And when we do that, we know that we are providing a facility that is safe, that is healthy, and that is the type of environment that we want our young people really growing, developing, and maturing and thriving in. So in that respect, it's a really great opportunity to change a young person's life. So with all that being said, great opportunities here. So it's interesting how, a lot of people see crises, other folks see opportunities. I would love for us to flip the script on that and see these great opportunities to do our jobs in a really extraordinary way. So I just want to encourage you to keep that in mind as you're moving forward. The last thing I'll share with you is our next session is next Friday, and we're going to be talking about what and when to communicate with your members and their parents. Super important conversation. We'll be talking about how you can communicate, or the things you need to be communicating with or about in terms of what you've done with the facility so far, what they can expect to see in the facility going forward, and everything that we're doing to make sure that that facility is safe and healthy for their son or daughter to live in. So that's going to be an exciting session. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if you have questions, please stay in touch. Reach out to us. Let us know what what questions you have. If you have feedback on these sessions, something you would love to see going forward, would love to know that too, because this is your time, and we want to make sure that there's value in these sessions for each of you, so you can do your job at a higher level. So Big fish to fry, lots to achieve, and we want to make sure we're hitting the mark for each of you. So with all that being said, I'll say thanks again for joining us today. Super grateful for you spending some time with us and for all you're doing. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.